He always had an idea to go back to Marjayoun and look for his ancestors' home, and I think he finally made the trip in January 2006 and looked for the house. And I think it was then when he had this idea of moving to the town for a year and just rebuilding the house.
This whole thing looks like it's a disaster, and then you see this one little glimpse of that iron grate. It's spectacular. I'm sure it's the same one that was there 80 years ago. So it kind of depresses you and makes you hopeful at the same time. This is Anthony Shadid reporting for the New York Times.
What makes you keep going back? You were shot in the shoulder in the West Bank in 2002. Why do you keep going back to war zones?
It's kind of pretty much the only thing I know how to do. You know, I've been covering it for 15 years. I think now finally is the moment that we see that is transformative in the Arab world, and it does make you even more, I think, eager in some ways to cover it, to try to bring meaning to it, to witness it, and it matters. I think there are some stories that are worth taking risks for. And it is a little bit of a cliche, but I think there is some meaning to it that, you know, unless you're there covering it, no one is going to know about it. Unless you're there trying to bring meaning to it, to bring a certain depth to it, it won't be done otherwise. I love, you know, these small things that I think are so important.
He was actually involved in the smallest details of the building, from laying tiles on the ground to planting trees in the garden, and every little detail he was involved.
And we're going to redo these stones. We're going to clean them and then re-put we can save this marble from the original marble.
Well, this is exactly what I imagined this room looking like.
This can be spectacular, I think, when we renovate.
As the house was getting, you know, finished, he grew more and more fond of the house. He just loved this house so much. It was for him something that he had created, and created from imagination. In his imagination, it was where his family came from, where it all began. I think it must have been the happiest year of his life.
But there's a feeling when I was shot in Ramallah, and this happened in Libya, in Ajdabiya, where you fear you're about to die. But it was never frantic, it was never, you never felt like getting up and trying to run away, save your life. Instead, it's kind of just a weird resignation, just an acceptance. And
maybe what best characterized him is how nice he was. Whoever came knocking on his door, he made time to sit with them, to tell them what they needed to hear, and more importantly, to listen to them.
He was one of the most relentless and tireless reporters I ever worked for. And only after he had listened to hundreds of hours of people talking, after he had filled notebooks with things he had seen and smelled and heard, did he actually sit down to write.
His extra rare talent was to bring to people in a very poetic way what was happening in these areas. He wanted to be where the bombs were falling, where the human cost was being felt, and he wanted to report that and tell people the cost of war.
I think the world has lost an incredible communicator of this complicated and turbulent Arab world.
Universally respected.
Probably the best reporter of his generation in the Arab world.
Anthony Shadid was a giant.
Amen.
Beautiful
Amen. Amen.
well, I think peace in the Middle East is coming. I have to say, I'm optimistic. The moment when the Arab world is remaking itself, is refashioning itself, in some ways is being reborn. Keeping people at the center of the story is the most important thing. Understanding the humanity of these stories is the most important thing. And I think it's incumbent upon us as journalists and as reporters is to keep the humanity there, to keep the meaning of what's actually happening, so that we keep the people who read us engaged.